the Colorado House in 2004 and the Senate in 2006. He's both the youngest member of the Colorado Senate. Is that still true? That's true. And the GOP minority leader. And he's worked with Governor Ritter to divest para funds and investment with ties to Iran. Senator Penry has also been a frequent and welcome critic of the state administration's tax, budget, jobs, and union policies. Josh Penry.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you all for coming out. It's a great crowd. A lot of people here. I'm impressed. So it's nice to be here. I've had a chance to visit with many of you, and it's been a pleasure for those of you that I saw this week in our reports. And I see you again. For those of you I met for the first time, look forward to seeing you again. You know, Denver, Metro, Delta Montrose. I'm a West Slope guy. Forgive me. DMYR. I'll put it that way. I got to give it to you. I thought I had spoken in just about every venue imaginable. But you have broken ground. But thanks for the opportunity. It's funny when I got the call and they asked me what I thought about speaking here. I'm like, I don't know. It's not that I'm uncool. It's just that we don't have Hamburger Mary's in Grand Junction, Colorado. So you'll have to forgive me in the report. So what do you think? I said, nah, I don't care. Whatever. So it's a pleasure to be here, and it really is great to see so many young faces who believe in what the Republican Party stands for. And maybe not all of you are Republicans. I heard a couple of libertarian types over there, but individuals who believe in the power of the individual over government, the power of individuals to set their own course and make their own choices. I believe as strongly as I know that I'm standing here that is the value, that's the philosophy system that's right, not only for America today, but for future generations as well. So it's nice to see so many people who share those beliefs. You know, as a young person, one of the questions that I frequently get asked, sort of the first thing that people come and ask me when they sit down in my office is, how old are you? How old are you? And so I've actually taken a book out of my a page out of my son's playbook. He was 6 and a half, rounded up, and so I tell people frequently that I'm 33 and a half. So if any of you want to, if you ever have a tough audience and an older audience, feel free to use that one. And so I see Michael here as well. I had the opportunity to be on his blog show, as he mentioned the other day, and I was actually walking from a dinner in Lodo over to my condo, and it happened to be St. Patrick's Day night. And so as I was walking down the street, people were flooding out of bars, hooting and hollering. I think there was a couple of fist fights along the way. So that was what was going on. I couldn't tell you on the air, but now you know. Well, I don't want to spend a ton of time giving you sort of prepared canned remarks. I want to engage with you and talk to you and hear your questions, hear what's on your mind. But as I said at the outset, I really believe that now more than ever it's critical for young people like ourselves to step up, to step out, and articulate our version of events, our vision of where this country should head. And, I get reporters a lot asking me, what do Republicans have to do, what do conservatives have to do to re-engage with young people? And I think that sort of the fundamentals of where the party has been, we're at our apex. Back when Ronald Reagan was president, back before some of us were born, or others of us were in short pants, or others of us were maybe in elementary school. Those vision, those values are still as relevant today as they were back then. For example, since when in America did rugged individualism become uncool? You know what I mean? Since when did the idea that government intervenes and micromanages every aspect of your life from morning to night, from cradle to grave, from elementary to high school to college and beyond, since when did that become a fashionable notion? And yet, when you look at what's happening in Washington, D.C., with this Congress and this administration in particular, and when you look what's happening at the General Assembly, at the legislature, day in and day out, every day there are bills proposed, new ideas for government to tell people how to live their lives. And my question is, since when did that become cool? Since when did that become relevant to young people, to young professionals, to people who believe in the American dream, who believe in the power of self-individualism? And I would contend that it is still very cool and still very relevant. What we have to have as young people is the courage essentially to articulate the alternative worldview. I mean, when you talk to most people our age, we know what we're going to hear. And in fact, one of the things that I worry about with the election of President Obama is that Democrats, that young people are just going to become accustomed to voting Democrat. They like Barack Obama. He's the in thing. He's the flavor of the month. He's articulate. He seems like he gets it. And therefore, that's the way we're going to vote always and forever. If you go back and look at history, that's what happened with FDR. We have an obligation in this generation, in this time, in this place, to step up and meet that opposition, that ideological opposition. Yes, we're all Americans, but at the end of the day, we see the world very differently than the people who are in power. And one of the ways One of the ways we do that, as I said, I think we have to frame the choice, we have to frame the discussion in ways that are culturally relevant to people. As I said, since when did rugged individualism become uncool? I like to talk about when we're talking about tax policy, when I'm talking to young people, and they say, well, government should solve, what about the children? What about all these problems? I mean, it seems like government should step in and solve all these problems. The example that I always use when I'm talking to a young class or an old class, college class, high school class is say, okay, for those of you who have an iPod, download iTunes. How many of you? And everybody raises their hands, always and forever. How would you like it if Uncle Sam in the state of Colorado taxed you $1 every time you downloaded a song on iTunes? And of course, there's booing and hissing and moaning. Sounds like a terrible idea. And yet, if you look at the state of New York, their governor actually this year proposed to increase and to create a tax on iPod downloads as part of 137 new taxes and fees to balance the budget. Well, the kids in that state, the college students, young professionals, went irate, marched to the Capitol. It was ultimately defeated. And what I've said many times is the first Republican Senate leader to actually own an iPod. I am adamantly opposed to an iPod tax and a download fee or surcharge. And I'm also opposed to government stepping up during tough economic times like we're having now and saying, we're going to balance our budget by making it harder for you to balance your own. We're not going to make cuts in our own budget. We're going to ask you to give us some more of your own money. We're not going to look at the programs that we have in place and look for more efficiencies and a better way to go about doing business. We're going to ask you to dip into your wallet once more. Again, it's not always something you hear from young people, but I think it's a message that ultimately is as culturally relevant with our generation, with our peers, as it ever was for our parents and their parents too. The last thing I want to talk about, and I'm just giving you the general stuff here. I really am looking forward to the question and answer. I think the last real opportunity for Republicans, for conservatives, on an issue that has a supreme relevance to people our age is the issue of education. I've been in the legislature for 5 years. In my first year, I was in the General Assembly. The chairman of the Education Committee is a nice guy. His name's Mike Merrifield. Actually, some people wouldn't say he's nice. I say he's nice. But he came up to me and he says, I was a teacher for so many years, and this member was a teacher, and this member was an administrator. And he says, well, what's your qualification to serve on the Education Committee? I said, well, I just graduated from high school 2 years ago. But it wasn't quite that bad. But I said, I'm not a career professional educator, and yet I've got a son who's 3 years old. I have a young daughter who's on the way, and I want them to have great schools. I want them to have great opportunities. And what you see, and so I got on the Education Committee. What you see on the Education Committee is sort of the classic clash of special interest politics. The Democrats are beholden to teachers' unions, to school boards, to the school executives, many of whom are wonderfully nice people, but all of whom are wedded to a status quo in the public education system that's failing lots and lots of kids. In suburban districts, a lot of times it's not setting the bar as high as it should be for our students, for our kids to compete with countries like China and India that are rapidly advancing or pushing the bar in really aggressive ways. If you go into inner city schools like Denver public schools, it's immoral. It is immoral. We have to talk about immoral terms. It's immoral for us to force young men and women in this great country into schools that are failing. And yet, in so many instances, that's what we do. We send them to schools that just are not up to par. And what it does is it ultimately sets kids back with 2 strikes. And that's where the opportunity comes from Republicans. If we're smart enough to think innovatively, to be willing to challenge some of that status quo, to say, you know what, rather than just saying that's the way it is and that's the way it's going to be, let's raise the bar. Let's see China and India, and let's raise them. Let's set the high bar so that when you graduate from high school, your diploma means something. Let's tackle tenure so that if you have a bad teacher in the classroom, the administration, parents, accountability committees, they can do something about it. Let's pay teachers more, but let's pay them based on merit. Let's pay them based on the quality of work that they do. Let's talk about class size. Yes, let's get teachers more training, but at the end of the day, let's also focus on making sure that it's good teachers who survive and succeed in the classroom. And to me, that's the issue that excites me when I talk to people in this age, in this demographic, because it really does go to the fundamentals of what's going to happen in the future of this country. And it's an issue where Republicans are right and the other guys are wrong. And so we can prosecute the case and make the case with guts and conviction. So, with all that said,